Get ready for the countdown. 10.
Fate is driving me insane.
9.
Gotta get the fuck out of LA.
8.
Don't swerve in my lane. Don't swerve in my lane.
7.
Our heart begins to suffer with a soul that's given up.
6.
You should've known better to fuck with someone like me.
5.
Out here on planet Zero, we live like no tomorrow.
4.
Oh, give me something to take the edge off.
3.
You out of pocket. 2 ATMs, you stepping to what? You out of pocket.
2.
I fell in love with an emo girl. All I want is an emo girl.
1.
Been a long time since I made a new band. Waiting on another black summer to win.
Is it that time again already? I guess it is. 2022 is coming to an end, the holiday is near, and that means it's time for year-end list season. And as we do, we started off with the worst that came out of the year. Now, with 2022, I definitely didn't do a ton of album reviews. I think I did under 40 this year, which my goal was to keep it at least 50 or under, and we did that. I kind of just looked at albums this year that I wanted to look at. I didn't try to overstack myself considering I knew I'd be busy, and with all the stuff going on family-wise at the end of the year, I knew that I just wasn't going to have time to listen to a bunch this year, and that's kind of why the music content on my channel was maybe decreased more than I was hoping it to be, but you know, that's just what comes with narrowing down things that you want to listen to. And of course, there was quite a bit of bad this year. And by that I mean, I don't think a lot of the stuff that I heard was absolutely terrible, and don't get me wrong, there were some really bad albums this year, but it was kind of the year of disappointment, where a lot of bands and artists that released an album this year that I anticipated kind of just didn't do well. Not to say that these were bad, but they're bad to me this year just because they didn't live up to the expectation that I had for them. Now, I'm not doing the rule from last year where my most disappointing album will be at the #1 spot, mainly because I feel like the #1 worst album this year is truly the worst album, and I couldn't rank any of my disappointing albums ahead of them. But number 3 and number 2 are actually albums that did disappoint me this year. But #1 is truly the worst thing that I heard in the year 2022. But of course, we're not starting off right to #1 because, well, that would just make this video go by way too quick. We're actually going to start off with my number 10 pick.
10.
This is where the disappointing comes in, and this album pains me to put it on here because it just, the way they were able to make a tribute to a fallen bandmate on the first record about a couple years ago, to releasing this, I don't know, it just kind of feels forced.
It's much too short to be intoxicated.
Now, I do regret some things that I said in this review, mainly the thing that this felt like they were grave robbing Chester, because I get before Chester passed, they were kind of working on, you know, re-editing their old songs to kind of, you know, make them for this generation and release them as completely new albums, so maybe they had it planned, I don't know. But Amends, the album that came out in 2020, felt like a great homage to Chester, the fallen bandmate who, if you don't know, this was Chester Bennington's first band before Linkin Park. And that kind of had more of a alternative rock mixed with more of a grungy type feel that I thought fit very well for the band. But with this album, which is titled The Phoenix, I don't know, it's supposed to be the more, like, if you like the heavier, more screamier side of Chester, this is the album that gives it to you. But aside from a couple songs, everything else just kind of feels really generic, and it just kind of disappointed me in that way where after their first album went so well for me, I had very high expectations going into this record, and yet it just left me wondering what the hell happened and why even put this out if this isn't even going to be the best that they have. Like, at this point, it just feels like they're just trying to get rid of these recordings so that way they can, I don't know, break up or continue as a band without Chester. Like, I have no clue what the plan is here once Great Days runs out of recordings, but time's running low on them, and if this is really going to be it for them, this was not the best.
9.
We're really starting off the list with 2 disappointing records, because this band had 2 records right out of the gate, debut and sophomore record that were just like, yeah, like hardcore and even mainstream at some point in time. So I don't want you to think that I'm talking about this record because it's mainstream. This band has delved into the mainstream before, but they've never done it this bland. Yeah, this album by I Prevail was definitely, I don't know how to put it, but it's their worst yet. Sometimes when a band gets their 3rd record, you start to realize what they're going to be by then, and at this point, they're just going to keep running themselves into the ground like 3 Days Grace if they don't change something. Like, there was a couple of high-intensity songs, but other than that, it just didn't feel like the magic that they could capture from their first 2 records. It's not like they tried to experiment a whole lot. It's basically the same from what you get from their first 2 records, but there just seems to be something missing from this record here, and it just, I don't know. I just remember listening to this thing and just being bored by it, and with I Prevail, you're not supposed to be bored. I should have known there was going to be a little bit of worry because they kept releasing like these acoustic tracks, which I have no problem with acoustic tracks, but it seemed like they were even starting to dumb themselves down a little bit more than usual, and that should have been like the part in my head where I'm like, oh well, maybe the 3rd album might be a little disappointing, but I kept up hope that it wouldn't be, and I was wrong.
8.
So this artist, I was not really that big of a fan of, but when I heard that they were returning to pop punk and them having being a veteran in that scene, I thought maybe, just maybe, they can show the posers of this new pop punk revival how it's done, but somehow it just came out as bland and generic and stereotypical as the pop punk of today, leaving me wondering, what the hell happened? Now, I got a lot of shit in 2019 for putting Avril Lavigne's album Head Above Water on the worst albums of the year list. And, I mean, Avril Lavigne has always been very hit or miss to me. Like, don't get me wrong, I think her first 3 albums are fine, but I've never really been, like, a humongous fan of hers. You know, I really stopped paying attention around 2011, and then when she fully moved on to like the more pop rock thing in 2013 and even on Head Above Water, it was just kind of like, you know, I don't really care anymore. And the only reason I gave her 2019 album a listen was because, you know, it was her first album in 6 years. She had, you know, returned from her battle with Lyme's disease. She won that battle, and, you know, I was like, well, maybe, even though these songs felt personal, I just wasn't feeling it. I thought maybe for a second it would, but it didn't. But one thing I can say about Head Above Water to this album, Love Sucks, holy shit, that is a way more mature album than this thing. Like, why did Avril have to, like, go so dumb with this? Like, I'm not calling her dumb, I'm just saying the sound and overall atmosphere of the album is just so, I can't even put my head around it. Like, she was making more mature songs in her teens than she is now at almost 40 years old. Again, it just felt like she copy-pasted everything like MGK, Youngblood, or Black Bear, or whoever's doing pop-punk music now that wasn't before. It just seemed like she was copying and pasting it and just doing what was popular instead of going back to the drawing board. I mean, heck, she just did a song with Youngblood after this record came out that kind of sounded more like her older era, and I did enjoy that song. But a lot of these songs on here, they don't stick. Whether it's bad lyrics or just generic instrumentation or just, I'm sorry, but Avril's vocals on this record not feeling like her. There's just a whole lot from this record that really screamed that it was just more of a sellout than it was a return to form to me. And I know it's insane saying that, considering, like I said, pop punk was what she used to do, so her going from pop to pop punk isn't necessarily seen as selling out, but it seemed like she only went back to it because it was popular again, and she was surrounding herself with people in that genre. I mean, Travis Barker does the drumming on this album, and I mean, it's cool and all, but I knew this record from the start, from the singles coming out, was going to be a disaster, and to be honest with you, it really didn't surprise me that this album wasn't all that great, because again, I wasn't a big fan, and I just knew that something was going to go wrong here, and she was going to, you know, do a more generic sound than go back to what she used to do, and like I said, hopefully she goes back to the drawing board if she wants to continue doing this pop-punk thing, because this did not work.
7.
Post Malone, to me, has never been an albums guy. There's definitely singles out there of his that I do like because he's able to tackle so many different genres in different ways that it's always interesting when you hear something different from him. But when you try to listen to an album of full material from him, I feel like it just becomes boring in places because a lot of his albums just feel too bloated. And then we get this new record where somehow it just, like, this is definitely his worst, right?
Take a bitch, give her back, insane, send her package, she was acting crazy.
Like, even though I would say Stoney was probably his worst before this, 12 Carat Toothing is just Post Malone, I guess, flipping the switch on the whole rapping thing, which he does, but obviously he includes more pop songs on here and more acoustic tracks to show you how sad and upset he is. But unlike his other albums, there's not really one highlight song from this record. Like, at least I can say on his other albums, there's always one or two songs that you can pick out from the crowd that are like, yeah, these are the best ones. But on this album, I don't get that. And I don't know what it is or what he tried to do with this record, but there just wasn't one single song on here that I would say is worth going back to. And this album also kind of just like popped in and out. Like, people talked about it for a while, and then it just kind of went away to the point where I think most people even forgot that this came out, myself included, until going back and seeing the albums I reviewed and listening to them again and going, yeah, you know, this was definitely one of the worst of the year. Not disappointing, because I wasn't expecting a whole lot from it, but I was at least expecting some sort of like 50-50 kind of feeling on it, and really, it's not a good record at all.
6.
This is one of the bands that I used to enjoy back in the day, but their past couple of releases, I'm kind of just, at this point I think I realized I'm done with them, and that band is Papa Roach. Aside from the songs Kill the Noise and No Apologies, this record is bland, it's boring. They teased that they were going to, you know, get back to the sound of what they sounded like on their first, like, couple of big records, but I didn't hear it at all. It's just this same generic mainstream bullshit they've been pulling for, like, the past 3 or 4 records. And there's that god-awful, horrid song, Swerve, where I just don't understand how people can defend that song and say this is Papa Roach's peak. Like, that is them at their best, because it sounds like an even more watered-down Kid Rock, and the fact that Fever 333 featured on the track, it just makes me go, there was so much potential here, and you shit on it. I don't know with them anymore. Like, Papa Roach is one of those ones where they're a shell of their former selves, and sometimes when they play these new songs of theirs on the radio, I don't even know it's them until the radio goes, hey, that was Papa Roach with yada 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 blah blah blah. It's like, wait, that was Papa Roach? That one? Because even though No Apologies is a different song and I do like it, I can say when I first heard it on the radio, I did not think, oh yeah, this is Papa Roach, because it kind of has more of that like early to mid 2000s kind of emo alt-rock feeling, and you're not supposed to think that way with Papa Roach. And I know they had the song Scars, which kind of took off in the emo community back in the day, but they were never really known for that. They were more of just this, I guess you can say, more nu metal band that mixed rap and rock together and could get soft every so often, but they never felt super generic until you hit around 2011 or 12 when they just started to pump out the same thing over and over and over again, and it's just been a complete and utter shit show since.
5.
I'm done defending this band. I can't do it anymore.
Just you wait and you see that you're swimming with sharks. He's coming to get you.
I thought Mercury Act 1 was bad, but compared to Act 2, Mercury Act 1, my goodness, at least Mercury Act 1 had songs on there where I can see the appeal. But with Mercury Act 2, who are the Imagine Dragons trying to appeal to here? Like, it's just so... Somehow they continue to get worse, and this is one of those times where the sequel is worse than the first. And, yeah, I think this was just my final nail in the coffin for the Imagine Dragons, because I kept holding up hope that, you know, maybe they could pop up, do something like at least maybe what they did off Evolve. I feel like I can listen to their first 3 records and be fine, but since Origins, we've just been kind of on a steady decline here, and the decline keeps getting steeper and steeper, and, like, the Imagine Dragons, it's weird because their singles are still doing fine, but I don't hear about them as much as I did. Like, nobody's, like, going like, oh, yeah, they put out one of the best albums of the year, or this, that, and the other. It's kind of like the whole Post Malone thing, where I feel like this album came and went, like it had its peak, and now nobody's really talking about it. Most people probably forgot this thing came out. They probably just heard the singles and were like, oh yeah, Imagine Dragons popped up, not knowing that a full entire album, which I think had like 18 songs on it, came out. And I'm sorry, why do we need an Imagine Dragons record with that many songs? I mean, Act 1 already had 14 songs. You had 18 more onto that. That's 32 songs from them that we didn't need. I think they were better off making albums when it was like 10 to 11 tracks each, and we didn't have much to go off of, but now it's just kind of like they're making these songs and they're putting a lot of filler in there when they really shouldn't be. You know, we know, or I don't know if we know, but I know they have the talent, because their first record they showed it, second record they did things a bit differently and it didn't do as well, and I feel like that's when they started to flip the switch onto where they're going now, where they're like, well, the second album didn't do as well as the first, so maybe if we just keep going down, keep appealing to the mainstream and doing more of a pop sound, that could work. And to me, it's just been the worst music that I think they've ever made. And Act 2, yeah, I'm done. I don't want to talk about them anymore.
4.
You know, the name of this album just sums up how I feel about it in general.
D-block, 'cause you know how sticky it get. You know how sticky it get.
Why did Drake think this was a good idea? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm more of a fan of Drake's more dance R&B type side than I am his rap side, but he's coming off an album like Certified Lover Boy, where I can tell you, everybody I know would say that that album was trash. So I guess he decided, why not do this more serious kind of, you know, club record in the year 2022, where I'm sorry, but, you know, since COVID, not a lot of people want to go to clubs. I mean, maybe it's just because I don't live the party life, I don't know, but I just don't know a lot of people nowadays that are in the mood to go to the club and especially listen to Drake. I just don't think that it's, like, really that much of a thing anymore. And plus, when you're basically making the same song over and over and over again on a record, like, none of these songs sound different from each other, of course it's all going to combine together and just sound like nothing at all. Like, that's all this sounds like at point in times. It's just noise, Drake's vocals popping up here and there that are really badly auto-tuned, and, like, I don't know. It was one where I thought the premise was good, but it wasn't tackled well, and you just left going, like, why does this thing even exist then, if that's the effort that you were going to give us? I mean, even some of the beats on here are just too predictable, and you got that little bed squeak beat that just kind of throws the vibe off of one of the songs. It's just like, I don't really know if he should be the go-to anymore. I just don't. Like, his albums continue to just sell, but again, this was one of those records, again, came and went. That's more of a main theme on the worst list this year too, is these albums just kind of popped up, had their peak, and then have fallen off. And I know that's the same for most albums, but when we're talking about someone who's on the level of like Drake and even, like I said, Imagine Dragons and Post Malone, the other two I talked about, they tend to, you know, stay for a while before falling off going into their next era. This was like a big drop. Like, people were like, Drake's dropping this new album tonight. They listened to it and they said, okay, I'm tired of it. I don't really care anymore. And that's basically where, honestly, Nevermind is left, is just in the pit of, oh, that came out this year?
3.
Ironically, I put 3 Days Grace at number 3 without even knowing.
Oh, give me something to take the edge off, something to kick the night off.
Like Papa Roach, this used to be a band that I was fond of. I used to be excited for everything that came out. Even after Adam left, you know, I feel like the first 2 albums with Matt Walst were, you know, fine, passable. But now we're here, the 3rd album with Matt Walst, and somehow it's more generic and just boring as before. Like, it just, like, I get that 3 Days Grace have always been kind of safe with their sound, but they always had something interesting to go with it. But with this album, after So-Called Life, what are we left with here? We're left with a little bit of nothing, and I just haven't had fun listening to the songs on this record. Like, I've tried to go back and think to myself, you know, maybe it's just because it wasn't clicking with me at first. Let me see if you know, it just, you know, grows on me somewhat, and it hasn't. This is where the disappointing album comes in. This is the first really disappointing album that we had this year, where I said, man, this band, so much talent, and even Matt, I feel like his vocals on this record have gone up from where they were before, but I really don't think he fits this band as well as they think he does. I just don't, because before he joined 3 Days Grace, he was singing more of these, like, dirty songs about, you know, sex and drugs and alcohol and all that, to coming to a band who talks about more serious things. It just doesn't feel like Matt has the persona to do that. And even though he's probably gone through the stuff that he's singing about, I just don't feel it as much as I would feel it with Adam and all that. But, you know, I think in the first couple of records with Matt, it just still felt genuine enough, and they were still trying to make their songs interesting. But now it's just, hey, let's do the same little breakdown that we do, the same little, you know, chug guitar riff, and all this and that, and I couldn't really tell these songs apart that much anymore, and that's the sad part about it. You got the first song on the album, which is the best, and then the rest you're just kind of sitting there going, you know, how come the intensity from the first song is just gone, and it never comes back? And with 3 Days Grace, that can't happen. It really, really can't happen. But like Imagine Dragons, this is the final nail in the coffin. I don't think I can listen to 3 Days Grace anymore and be happy with it ever, because I know the outcome that I'm gonna get.
2.
The runner-up for Worst Album of 2022 may surprise you, because I don't necessarily hate this record. Again, it's on here because to me this is the most disappointing record of 2022. I feel like it's here as the runner-up because it had so much potential, and it only reached about half of it. And it's this record right here. When Muse was talking about this record, Will of the People, they were making it out, or at least the songs they were releasing, it was supposed to be some sort of, like, political statement. And I guess there are a lot of songs on here, like the title track, Won't Stand Down, Compliance, Kill or Be Killed, that definitely do, like, I guess, talk about that kind of stuff. But then we get other deep cut songs on here where it's just more like, I'm lonely and I love you, and I'm just like, wait, but isn't the topic of the album supposed to be, like, political and angry? Like, why are we getting this you know, mushy gushy type shit here? And it's like a song like You Make Me Feel Like It's Halloween, even though I don't hate that song. I just feel like on this record it's a little bit out of place. If you were to put it on their last record, Simulation Theory, I think maybe it would fit better, but this just kind of sounded like they had a bunch of different ideas and said, well, we're going to say it's this one particular idea when really it's a bunch of these. And aside from the singles, the deep cuts are really weak. And that's why I think this record only really goes 50-50. is because when you take a look at the 4 singles that came out before this record, they really had me attached as to what they were going to do. I mean, Won't Stand Down, Compliance, and then I believe it was the title track, Will of the People, and Kill or Be Killed came out in that order. And I said, they have not missed yet. Maybe this will be better than Simulation Theory. And I'm kind of thinking about it to myself, I think I would prefer Simulation Theory over this, because at least Simulation Theory has some deep cuts on there that I can actually, get down to. But with this record, it's 10 songs, and yeah, it goes by fairly quickly, but outside of the singles, the deep cuts are kind of harder to get through, and that's kind of the turn-off on this record. So that is the main reason why Muse ended up here as the runner-up for Worst Album of 2022. However, they're not the worst thing that came out this year. Before we get to that, though, we gotta get through 5 dishonorable mentions that barely missed the list. Now, what I'm doing this year with the dishonorable mentions list is, these are 5 albums that I did listen to, but I didn't give a review to at all, because maybe I just listened to them and they just didn't surprise me or didn't give me much to talk about in the first place. But these are here just to show you that I am acknowledging them because I listened to them, but because I didn't review them, I couldn't properly put them on the list because that would be unfair. So, without further ado, in no particular order, let's get these dishonorable mentions started and do them in rapid fire. It's a Skillet album. What more do you want me to say?
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me at tea time.
Taylor Swift had me with the Folklore Evermore thing, and her even re-recording her old albums to make them her own. That's fine too. But now with Midnights, it kind of sounds like if The Weeknd and Lady Gaga came together to collab, but done with someone who isn't really that talented. Oliver Tree, man. I didn't know why I didn't expect to be disappointed, but we're here.
Didn't ruin my life.
It's Simple Plan. What more were you expecting?
Years ago, we all thought it was a joke. See, that every kid got a motherfucking trophy.
Kid Rock really thought he did something with this. He really thought he pwned the liberals, but really it just made him look like the stupid douchebag Trump supporter that he really is.
1.
Alright, okay. With the dishonorable mentions out of the way, we're down to what I think is the worst album of 2022. Now, this year I mentioned that pop punk, like last year, was rising up, and there were artists that were doing the genre, that were doing them generic, and just giving them little to no substance at all. It felt boring, like they're dumbing down the genre of pop punk, which was more complicated back then than I think people gave it credit for. And there was one man leading the charge, one man who 2 years ago decided he was going to switch genres, and his first pop punk attempt didn't do all that well. But I said this, I said, there's some potential in there with some of these songs, and if he can continue going down that road, he might be going somewhere. Then his second pop punk album released, and yeah, I was wrong.
I fell in love with an emo girl. All I want is an emo girl.
And again, like his last record, there's stuff on there that I do like. I mean, I will still defend the song Paper Cuts, even though people say it's annoying. I feel like that was where you can see him kind of trending toward maybe there's something here. And even the more rap-leaning song A is fine, but again, in the end, you're left with just like, why did he need to do this again? He is now going back to rap, so was this all just part of a plan to say that he was the reason that rock music has come back into the mainstream, or did he truly care about what he was putting out there? And 2 records in, you're just kind of going, yeah, I really think this was more just a plot because his rap career was failing after the whole Eminem beef thing, that he thought if he switched genres real quick, he could just make some quick bucks, make some quick hits, people would still continue to know who he is, and then go back into the genre that he became popular in anyway. And that, to me, is just so shitty, and the fact that he made these albums and people think that they're hot shit. Mainstream Sellout is getting nominated for a damn Grammy Award. Who the fuck thought that was a good idea? But it just, I don't know, it confuses me what MGK was trying to do here, and with his second attempt at pop punk, it was just as we all expected. And listening to it, really, I don't know why I expected it to be any better than the first, because MGK trying to pander to an audience that's feeling nostalgic, and maybe even a younger audience who hears the new pop punk and says, oh, this is what it is, this is what it should be, when no, you don't know the half of it. So yeah, that is it, ladies and gentlemen, for the 10 worst albums of 2022, in my opinion. I would really love to hear what you thought was the worst album of the year, or you can even give me your top 10 list from number 10 to number 1, what you thought were the worst albums that you heard this year. It doesn't necessarily have to be just rock. It can be rock and pop and rap mixed together, or you can, split into categories. I don't care. Just, I'm interested to see what you guys thought was the worst album that you heard this year, and give me an explanation as to why. But until then, that's it for me. Stay safe out there. Have a happy, happy holidays, and I will catch you all in 2023.